Imagine a small town where everyone seems fine. The shops are open. The bank looks solid. People go to work. Kids go to school. Nothing feels dangerous. Now imagine that most of that town is quietly built on promises. Not bad promises. Normal ones. I'll pay you later. This will be worth more tomorrow. Don't worry, it always works out. The Great Depression began inside those promises. To explain it simply, you have to start with how people think when things are going well. When life feels stable, nobody wakes up thinking about collapse. They think about opportunity. They think about improvement. They think about how to get a little more than they had yesterday. In the 1920s, the United States felt like it had figured something out. Factories were productive. Electricity was spreading. Cars were becoming common. Radios connected people. Wages were rising for many, though not all. The future felt manageable, even generous. And when the future feels generous, people borrow from it. Borrowing is not a mistake by itself. It is a tool. You borrow time, or money, because you expect tomorrow to pay you back. Farmers borrowed to buy better equipment. Families borrowed to buy homes and appliances. Investors borrowed to buy stocks. Businesses borrowed to expand. The key idea is that borrowing only works if tomorrow keeps its promises. Stocks became the clearest symbol of this belief. People did not buy stocks because they loved companies. They bought them because prices kept going up. If a stock rose yesterday, it felt reasonable to assume it would rise tomorrow. If you could borrow money to buy it, even better. That way, you controlled more with less. This is where things quietly shifted. When borrowing becomes easy, prices stop reflecting reality and start reflecting optimism. Stocks rose not because companies were suddenly more productive every week, but because more money was chasing them. Rising prices then convinced more people that borrowing was safe. That belief fed back into the system. Nothing about this felt reckless at the time. It felt modern. Banks participated because lending made money. Investors participated because returns looked obvious. Ordinary people participated because everyone around them was participating. This was not madness. It was social proof mixed with math that seemed to work. But underneath all of it was a fragile assumption that prices would not fall. The moment prices stop rising, borrowing becomes dangerous. If you bought a stock with borrowed money and its price drops, you still owe the loan. If the drop is large enough, you cannot repay it. And if many people are in that position at the same time, lenders start to worry. Worry spreads faster than optimism. In 1929, stock prices began to wobble. Not crash at first. Just wobble. That was enough. Some investors sold to protect themselves. Selling pushed prices down further. That made more investors nervous. More selling followed. Once prices fall far enough, borrowing stops working entirely. Loans are called in. People scramble to find cash. Stocks are dumped at any price. What had been slow turns violent. The stock market crash did not cause the Great Depression by itself. It revealed it. Here is the part that often gets missed. When stocks collapsed, money did not just disappear from Wall Street. It vanished from balance sheets across the country. Banks had lent against those assets. When their value collapsed, banks were suddenly exposed. Banks do not keep your money in a vault waiting patiently. They lend it out. That is how banking works. It works beautifully when confidence exists. It fails abruptly when it doesn't. As rumors spread that banks were in trouble, people did the most rational thing possible. They tried to get their money back. A bank run is not caused by stupidity. It is caused by timing. The first people in line are fine. The last ones lose everything. Banks began to fail. When a bank failed, deposits vanished. Savings accounts that represented years of work simply ceased to exist. That loss rippled outward. Families cut spending because their money was gone. Businesses lost customers. Businesses then cut wages or fired workers. Unemployment rose not because employers suddenly became cruel, but because revenue collapsed. Factories slowed. Farms suffered. International trade shrank as countries tried to protect themselves. Every system leaned inward, and in doing so, made the contraction worse. It is important to understand that no single decision caused this. Each step made sense in isolation. Investors sold to avoid losses. Banks tightened lending to survive. Consumers stopped spending to stay safe. Governments hesitated, unsure how to intervene without making things worse. The system was not designed to handle everyone being careful at the same time. When people stop spending, businesses lose income. When businesses lose income, they stop paying workers. When workers lose income, they stop spending even more. This loop feeds on itself. And here is the cruelest part. The people most harmed by the Depression were not the ones who took the biggest risks. They were often the ones who had played by the rules. They saved. They worked. They trusted institutions. And they found that trust did not protect them. Children went hungry not because food did not exist, but because money did not move. Farmers destroyed crops while cities starved because the system connecting them had broken. At this point, it becomes tempting to look for villains. Greedy bankers. Reckless investors. Corrupt politicians. But that story is comforting because it suggests the problem was moral. It wasn't. The problem was structural. The economy had become highly productive but poorly buffered. It could grow quickly, but it could not absorb shocks. There were few safeguards. No insurance for deposits. Little support for the unemployed. Weak coordination between governments and financial institutions. Once collapse began, there were no soft landings. The response took time. Governments experimented. Some policies helped. Some made things worse. But gradually, new systems emerged. Bank protections. Social safety nets. Rules around lending and markets. Not because people became wiser, but because the cost of not having them had become impossible to ignore. If this story ended there, it would be history. It still matters because the core mechanics never went away. We still borrow from the future. We still build systems that work brilliantly under confidence and poorly under fear. We still confuse rising prices with stability. We still underestimate how quickly trust can evaporate. The Great Depression is not a warning sign taped to the past. It is a diagram of how complex systems fail when incentives line up just wrong. By the way, if you find yourself pausing here, thinking more than you expected to, this is the kind of channel that explores these systems quietly and carefully. Subscribing is less about staying informed and more about staying oriented. No pressure. Just an option. The reason this story is often explained, like you're 5, is not because it is childish. It is because the underlying logic is simple. People act reasonably. Systems amplify those actions. Outcomes become unreasonable. Adults sometimes struggle with that idea because it removes the comfort of blame. What makes the Great Depression unsettling is not its scale. It is its familiarity. You can recognize its patterns in smaller crises. In bubbles. In sudden layoffs. In moments when everyone tries to be safe at once and discovers that safety is collective, not individual. The Depression did not happen because people forgot how the economy worked. It happened because they trusted that it would keep working without stress. And perhaps the most uncomfortable thought is this: nothing about the 1920s felt like the edge of disaster while people were living in it. It felt like progress. It felt like momentum. It felt like the future arriving early. That is why it still matters. Not as a lesson. Not as a morality play. But as a reminder that stability is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of resilience. And resilience is quiet, uncelebrated, and usually built only after it is needed. The Great Depression is not a story about collapse. It is a story about how much of the world depends on things continuing to feel normal.